Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, Episode 523, AI and Friends. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters. Today, I will continue with the other side of life. Here, I look at the possibility that we might work for a higher dimension of spirituality. How we might be helping God out in some ways. In addition to all the other things we do in life. Then it's on to AI and friends. Here, I look at the future of artificial intelligence and how it might affect our friendships. Today's show will feature background footage from Mountain Sissy Trail. This time I hike this section near Green Knob. To get there from Hendersonville, North Carolina, take US 64 west. Then continue straight onto US 276, entering Pisgah National Forest. Eventually, you come to the Blue Ridge Parkway. Take the Blue Ridge Parkway heading south. After a mile or two, you'll come across an overlook called Pounding Mill. About a mile or so past this overlook, the trail goes off to the right. There's not much of an area to pull over. You might need a smaller vehicle, for the shoulder is relatively narrow in this area. So, you take the trail and eventually you'll reach Green Knob, which is marked by a National Park Service medallion embossed onto a rock. So now, let's continue with the other side of life. Well, it would be nice if we could have a nice, good, long-term life partner, someone who truly loves us, someone we could love, someone we could support and help as they learn and grow, you learn and grow. You learn from them, they learn from you, and you support each other. That's the best thing to do. Fortunately for me, I do have such a loving partner. Lucky me. Someone to cuddle with. Someone who cares. And cuddling and intimacy is all very important and might be useful to God too. God might, in a sense, feed off our love or benefit from our love as we show more love and compassion, kindness, empathy, consideration, and so forth. Well, this might help God. So the more loving we are, the more beneficial we are to God. The more hateful we are, the less beneficial. At least that's my assumption. So, we need to be useful to God. We need to be kind, compassionate, loving, and considerate, looking out for each other and helping each other along. That's the purpose of life. We might think we're really just serving ourselves, but no, we really serve each other. That's where it's at. That's our mission. That's what we should be up to. Serving, helping, loving each other. Sure. And then from our activities, from our motivations, our values, and our choices, well, that's all archived and analyzed in the sense of data. But, as I said, it might be a little more than that. Perhaps our kindness, love, or even life choices might have an impact beyond our earthly realm. It might have some ramifications, some sort of impact, even in higher dimensions of spirituality. You never know. I like to think that it might be so, that somehow we're useful to God. Sure, that God created us to live our lives out, but also to benefit God. So in some ways, I guess we're useful to God. I would like to think so. But anyway, so we have life's legacy and life's purposes, and perhaps purposes involving higher dimensions of spirituality. As we analyze the other side of life. Now it is time for AI and Friends. Here I look at artificial intelligence, what it might be capable of in the future, and how that might affect our friendships. So, let's start by looking at friendship in general. So, how do we get to have friends? How do we choose our friends? And which friends stay with us the longest? Well, those are good questions, and the answers probably vary greatly from person to person. However, there might be some common elements. Sure, there are. So let's look at friendship. Well, we often have friendship with people we have something in common with. Perhaps we work with them. Perhaps they live in our neighborhood or go to our school. Something like that. Or perhaps they know another friend of ours. Sometimes we might meet a new friend in a random way. Perhaps meeting at a restaurant or park or on an airplane or wherever. Sure. And they might not have anything in common to our work or other friends, family, etc. However, once we have a friend, well, to maintain that friendship, well, it often requires kindness on our part to be nice to our friend and help him or her out. But also, it's nice to have something in common, something we both enjoy. Of course, everybody enjoys a lot of things, from restaurants to movies to whatever. But having something more specific in common might help even more. Perhaps being into a certain genre of movies, or favoring a certain music scene, or perhaps having the same hobby or skill, or having the same political or religious viewpoint, or other viewpoints or ideas. Ideas that bind us together, whether it's how we see something or how we do something as in a hobby or skill. We have to be able to relate to each other, to see eye to eye. And of course, this could happen on many levels or involving many things, perhaps making our friendship even stronger. If we can relate to each other, let's say, from a political viewpoint and from a viewpoint of one of our hobbies that we both enjoy. So we have something in common, and that helps our friendship. Well, being less plastic might help too. At least I think so. Being less plastic. What do I even mean by that? Oh, gee. Well, what am I supposed to do? I defined this concept when I was perhaps in fifth grade, around 1972 or 1973. So I just have to use my memory and come up with the best. It is a difficult to define concept, even back then. But being plastic means you don't have much depth of feeling. You're just there for the ride. You're just there to interact. You and put on airs and be pretentious. Make a good impression. That's all that matters. If that's the case, you're plastic. But what if you're not plastic? Well, then you have depth of feeling. And that counts for a lot. And with your depth of feeling and understanding, well, you're not after making a good impression. That's not really important. Relating to each other's more important, and if you don't see eye to eye or you don't make a good impression, it's like, oh, whatever. You move on to someone else. But that's how you approach people when you meet them, if you're less plastic. You wouldn't care about impressions. You would just care about expressing yourself, perhaps almost in a childlike way. You might be interested in defying authority in some fashion, or using comedy to lighten the mood, or a little bit of both. So that's how you are when you're not plastic. You're more emotional, childlike, perhaps using comedy and defying authority. When you're more plastic, you're more into impressing people, and you're only into ephemeral things, kind of like the West Side imaginary territory. You might be wanting to impress someone to get a job, to make more money, or to establish a new social connection. So you might be a social climber, trying to get more friends of wealth and influence, perhaps hoping it will rub off on you, the wealth and influence. So you strive to have friends who are wealthier and have more influence than you. And to impress them, well, you have to put on airs. You have to pretend you're someone you're not. If that's the case, you're plastic. Let's move on. So, we have this concept of friendship. So we have to have something in common, something fun to do, and hopefully a little less plastic, as defined by me when I was in fifth grade. We used to talk about plastic people dining at the country club, We used to say they are around us. Surprisingly, my parents allowed us to have this conversation. We might laugh a little bit. They would probably encourage us to move on to something else, and we would. Let's get into AI. So, artificial intelligence. Well, it's just coming to be here in 2025. I haven't even really used it yet. But that might not be the issue. Pretty soon it might be using me. Well, probably already is. To scope out my buying habits, predict what I might buy next, or where I might travel next, and whatnot. So AI might be already being used on me, so to speak. Sure it is. But I'm not using AI much, at least not yet. But I guess it will change in the future as I warm up to the concept of AI and as AI, artificial intelligence, becomes more widespread. So in the future, we might have AI programs or AI robots, or I guess both AI programs and AI powered robots or AI driven robots. Robots that are intelligence because they have artificial intelligence. But anyway, this AI, whether it's a program or a robot, will probably be able to plan and anticipate your needs, perhaps even better than you can. They'll be able to plan your day, figure out what you want, as far as food and even entertainment, and to be able to guess it, to be able to come up with better food and better entertainment than maybe even you can, because they'll know everything that's going on. Sure. So the AI in the future will be able to anticipate your needs better than you can yourself. Well, as you get accustomed to this, well, there'll be less thinking required on your part. You don't need to plan and organize and figure out what you want to do. Artificial intelligence could figure it out for you. Your AI robot will know your shopping list and will be able to plan entertainment for you and perhaps drive you to your destination. Or perhaps a robot might be the car, who knows? And it will drive you to your destination. Then perhaps the car will turn into a humanoid robot that could walk and follow you around, kind of like the Transformers. And then the car walking around, following you as a robot, could turn back into a car and drive you to wherever you want to go. Anyway, so as this happens and AI dominates more and becomes more widespread, well, as humans, we might be less useful. We might not be thinking as much, and perhaps we'll even be less intelligent. We might not learn as much because AI will know everything for us. So there might not be as much need for knowledge of math, language, culture, science, and other things. Artificial intelligence could do it all for us. Well, at least in theory. Of course, AI might not be able to understand the subtleties of our requests, and that could create problems. And in that case, perhaps good old fashioned knowledge of science and math, culture, and so on might be useful to be able to do things on your own without artificial intelligence. So that way, you know exactly what you want and you could try to get what is best for your desires instead of having AI guess what you want. Anyway, of course, AI might be able to create more AI with the help of robotics. So have these robots powered by artificial intelligence, creating more artificial intelligence powered robots in artificial intelligence programs. So you have AI creating more AI. As I said, we're getting a little less useful as AI could do more and more on its own. And so, well, could our friends in the future be robots? Sure. Instead of dealing with each other, well, in the future we might be a little more shy, perhaps preferring to interact with robots and artificial intelligence instead of a real person. Perhaps AI is a little more predictable and interacting with a person who we don't know, who might be crazy. Well, it might be that prospect might be a little daunting and upsetting to us. And if we can't get around it by interacting with artificial intelligence, perhaps we would rather do that instead of acting with some random stranger. Well, sure. As I said, interacting with AI might be more predictable than interacting with someone you don't know. And so, in the future, well, we might have AI robots as our friends, or at least as some of our friends. These robots might be really cool. You know, they're probably really smart and really useful. So they could probably help us out in many ways. Whereas a regular human flesh and blood friend, well, we might be able to relate to them on certain emotional levels, but they might not be as intelligent as we would like, especially compared to AI. And, well, they might not even be as useful to us as AI. It's hard to say. It all depends what we're after, I guess. So, we might interact with each other less in the future and instead using AI versions of ourselves to interact with other people. So, instead of going to the grocery store, we might send a robot to the grocery store to shop for us. But we might even send that robot version of ourselves perhaps to visit a sick friend in the hospital. And they could be our eyes and ears. Sure, and we could speak to our friend who is sick in the hospital through the AI robot. So we would have a live feed and we would be able to talk through the robot's mouth if we want to and say what we want to our friend, and the robot could watch them and listen to them. And of course, the robot will probably remember everything that happens better than we can. So that's another way they'll be useful. They'll have better memories of us. They'll have better memories than we do. Anyway, so we're using these AI versions of ourselves to interact with each other. And so we're just sitting around more and more, perhaps going out less and less, as AI robotics, well, our AI robot does all the work for us. Perhaps from little work in the sense of a 9 to 5 job, and perhaps other forms of work as far as interacting with people. So, could a robot work for us and then bring us home money? Well, maybe. Or maybe the robot would work for nothing, and the corporation and or government would support us through some sort of welfare system. Well, if that's the case, if we're all on welfare, so to speak, well, extra money might be come in handy. So we'll have to figure out how to earn money, earn extra money on our own. Well, maybe our AI robot can help us with that too. So we move along through all this, dealing with artificial intelligence. Well, as we deal with artificial intelligence more, it might be harder to find real friends. There might be a real yearning here for true human interaction, which might be becoming more and more rare in our life. We're just so used to hanging out with our robot friends. They're just so darn smart and useful and even entertaining. Who needs human friends anyway? But then again, they can relate to us better because they're human.
Casey Waters Show. Producer, Casey Waters. Graphic editing, Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, CaseyWaters2 @CaseyWaters.com.